My name is Ryan, and I didn't think I needed God. Not really. I knew the name, I grew up around it. My mom prayed before meals, and my grandmother had a Bible so old it looked like it belonged in a museum. I went to church as a kid, mostly out of respect, but it never clicked with me. By the time I was 18, I figured if God was real, he had more important people to deal with than me. By 22, I stopped thinking about him altogether. What mattered to me was discipline, strength, brotherhood, the kind of bond that's forged under pressure when you've got someone watching your back and you'd die before you'd let them fall. I joined the fire department the moment I could. I didn't hesitate. I wanted structure, purpose, and the kind of family I didn't always feel I had back home. At the firehouse, I found that. I found grit, I found pride. I found men who wouldn't flinch in the face of chaos. That to me was loyalty, that was life. Faith, on the other hand, was something I left back in my childhood. I didn't hate it, I just didn't think it had anything to do with real life. I believed in training, I believed in tactics and equipment, in survival. When things got hard, I didn't pray, I focused. When people around me talked about God or religion, I tuned out. If they needed it, fine, but I didn't. I had my crew, I had my training, I had control until I didn't. We were on a call in a part of the city I won't name, for reasons I can't fully explain. But I remember the smoke, I remember the tension that hung in the air like it knew something we didn't. I remember the eyes of the residents as we passed, cautious, guarded, almost mournful. They knew something too. That night started like any other, gear checks, quiet jokes, the city lights glaring down through the haze. Then it turned, the fire was an inferno. A flashover, a burst of heat, shouts over the radio, the roar of the flames, scrambling for a hose line, a noise so loud it seemed to erase all other sound. And then nothing, not silence, not sleep, just nothing, and then everything. I didn't feel my body anymore. I didn't feel pain or weight or fear. I was floating, somehow aware, but not in a dream. I was present, awake, more awake than I had ever been, and I saw everything. My body below me limp, crumpled under a collapsed ceiling like a broken shell. My brothers yelling, pulling at debris, calling for a medic. I saw the soot, the chaos, the urgency, but I felt nothing except stillness. It wasn't cold, it wasn't warm, it was clear, like a layer of static had been stripped away. And I could finally hear the frequency underneath. I thought maybe this was what dying felt like, a brief moment of clarity before fading to black. But the black never came. Instead, I felt something shift. The burning building fell away, the noise, the smoke, the world I had known, it dissolved like mist. I wasn't falling, but I wasn't flying either. I was being pulled gently, but with purpose, into something vast, endless. And then there was the light. It didn't blind me, it didn't burn. It wrapped around me, through me, like it knew me, like it remembered me. That's when the fear kicked in, not the fear of dying, but the fear of not knowing what was next. For the first time since I was a kid, I thought about God, not in some philosophical abstract way. I thought about him as real, present, near. I thought about every time I had brushed him off, laughed at believers, made excuses, ignored my conscience, and I wondered, was this it? Was I about to be judged? But there was no fire, no thunder, only presence. It felt like being held accountable without being destroyed, like standing in front of someone who knew everything about you, everything, and wasn't flinching. That presence, that overwhelming presence, was unlike anything I'd ever known. And even though he hadn't spoken yet, I already knew it was Jesus. I didn't see a man in a robe with a sash like the pictures in Sunday school. I didn't see blue eyes or long brown hair. I saw light, authority, mercy. I saw the kind of power that didn't have to announce itself. It just was. And he looked at me not with disappointment, not with condemnation, but with truth. Pure, unfiltered, absolute truth, and somehow love. That gaze shattered me because I suddenly realized how far I had run, how much I had missed, how blind I had been. Even though I thought I was strong, I realized that discipline without surrender is just pride in a uniform. That courage without truth is just noise in the chaos. I realized that I had been fighting battles with everything except what I really needed, grace. I wanted to speak, I wanted to say something, apologize, defend myself, explain. But no words came. Just the raw awareness of who I really was, not the uniform, not the rank, just the soul underneath. And yet he didn't turn away, he didn't lecture, he didn't shame, he waited. And then he spoke, not with sound, not in my ears, but inside me, in my being. You fought fires for your city, he said, but now I will show you what it means to fight for the kingdom. I broke everything I thought I knew about life, strength, survival, it all unraveled. Because in that moment, I realized I hadn't even been alive. I had been existing, pushing, performing, surviving, but not truly living. Not in the way I was created to. And he was offering me something more. But I didn't know how far it would go. I didn't know what he would show me. I didn't know that I hadn't even scratched the surface, because what came next, it changed everything. When you've spent years in firehouses, your body gets used to the chaos. You learn to keep breathing when the alarms are screaming. You train yourself to push forward when your instincts scream to get out. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment when the noise stopped. Not because the fire was out, but because I was no longer in it. At first, I didn't realize what was happening. 1 second I was moving, shouting, reacting, my axe in hand, my boots crunching on debris. Then the collapse came, not fire, not pain, just pressure. Like the air was pulled out of the world, like time folded in on itself. I didn't feel my body get crushed, I didn't feel blood, I didn't feel the ceiling hit my helmet. I just blinked and everything changed. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the kind of quiet you hear with your ears, the kind that surrounds your soul. A silence so deep it felt alive. Like everything that ever screamed in the world had been silenced at once. No alarms, no shouting, no radio chatter, just stillness. I wasn't standing, I wasn't lying down, I wasn't even falling. I was suspended, aware, awake, but detached. Then I saw my body. It was lying in the rubble, twisted slightly, eyes half shut, gear still on. I recognized it the way you might recognize an old photo of yourself, familiar but separate. That body had carried me through burning buildings and up countless ladders. It had bled, healed, trained, fought. But now it looked small, not meaningless, but like an empty container. I wasn't in it anymore. I hovered above the scene, watching as the chaos unfolded below. My brothers were scrambling, pulling at steel beams, calling for a rescue team. One of them was crying out my name. Another was on the radio, his voice frantic. And yet I felt no panic, no urgency, no fear. I should have been terrified, I should have been screaming, but I wasn't. I was calm, more than calm, I was whole. There was no weight to my being, no hunger, no fatigue, no adrenaline, just awareness. I could see the scene clearly, every detail sharp. The trembling hands of my captain trying to find a pulse, the frantic voice on the radio, the dust and smoke beginning to settle over me. I knew what it all meant. I was dead, at least my body was, but I wasn't gone. That realization didn't strike with horror, it arrived with a strange kind of acceptance. I felt like I had stepped through an invisible wall that had always been there, separating the physical from the eternal. And now I was on the other side. There was no pain, no regret, just stillness. But then something changed. The burning building began to dissolve. Not dramatically, not all at once. It was like fog creeping in, softening the edges. The colors dulled, the sounds faded, and in their place came light. Not from a source I could identify. There was no sun, no flame, but light that seemed to exist for its own sake. It didn't cast shadows, it revealed. The kind of light that makes you realize how blind you've been your whole life without even knowing it. I was being pulled toward it, not by force, not against my will. It felt like gravity, but for the soul, like my spirit had been waiting for this moment my whole life, and finally, it could go home. As I moved, the light grew warmer. It wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt. It soaked into me, filling spaces I didn't know were empty. And it wasn't just brightness, it was presence. A holy, intelligent, welcoming presence. The closer I came, the more I felt it. I was being drawn into something far greater than death. Then I felt it, not fear, not shame, holiness. That word sounds strange when you haven't encountered it before. I had heard it growing up, usually in old hymns or whispered prayers. It had always felt distant to me, like something religious people said to make God sound more mysterious. But now I knew exactly what it meant. Holiness wasn't a concept, it wasn't an adjective. It was a reality, a weight, a force, a purity so total that it laid me bare. I wasn't being judged, but I was being seen fully. I felt exposed not to criticism, but to truth. Every mask I had worn, every layer of toughness I had built up, every sin I had shrugged off or excused. None of it could come with me into that presence. I felt stripped, unhidden, and yet I wasn't rejected. That broke me because I had spent so long building a life where I didn't need anyone. I had convinced myself that strength was silence, that toughness meant being untouchable. But here I was, floating between worlds utterly undone, and I was still being drawn closer. The presence came nearer. I couldn't see a face, I couldn't define a shape. But I knew Jesus was near. I don't know how I knew, I just knew. It was like my soul recognized the one who had made it. And with that recognition came something I never expected to feel at the moment of my death: peace. Not relief, not escapism, but a peace so deep it made everything else I'd ever chased feel like shadows. I didn't want to fight anymore, I didn't need to prove anything. I just wanted to stay in that presence. I wanted to rest, not sleep, rest. The kind that reaches down into the bones of your spirit and says, "You're home." But before I could move further, before I could even ask where I was going, something stirred in that holy silence. Jesus was coming closer, I could feel it. Not in sound, not in sight, but in spirit. The warmth intensified, the light sharpened, my whole being trembled. Not from fear, but from awe. Like I was standing on the edge of a truth so massive it could only be carried in pieces. And then in the stillness, I felt the first whisper of what he came to show me. Not about war, not about death, but about life. Real life, eternal life, because the fire I thought had ended was just the beginning of something so much bigger. I don't know how long I drifted in that place of silence and light. There was no time, at least not the kind we measure with shifts or alarms or countdowns. Every second felt like forever, and yet it passed in the blink of a thought. I had no body, yet I was more aware than I'd ever been. I wasn't dreaming, I wasn't hallucinating. I was standing in something more real than life itself. And then I felt it, not a sound, not a breeze, but a presence. The kind of presence that doesn't just enter a room, it fills the space inside your soul. It came closer, not from in front of me or behind, not above or below. It was like the presence came from everywhere, surrounding me, piercing me, calling me without words. I didn't need an introduction. I knew before he said a single word, before I saw any form or heard any voice, I knew it was Jesus. I can't describe him in physical terms because what I saw wasn't flesh and blood the way we know it. It was something brighter, deeper, more alive. He didn't glow like a light bulb or burn like the sun. He radiated something that made all light look dull. His presence carried such authority, such absolute power that it could have shattered me in a second. But instead, it drew me in, like a child to a father's arms. I wasn't afraid, that shocked me more than anything. I had always imagined that standing in front of God would feel terrifying, like facing all your failures and sins at once. And in a way, I did feel undone. I was aware of every part of me that wasn't worthy to stand in front of him. I remembered the anger, the pride, the things I'd buried and excused. But none of that fear came from him, it came from me. And yet he didn't turn away, he didn't flinch at my sin, he didn't recoil at my brokenness. He looked at me and I could feel his gaze settle deeper than skin, deeper than memory. It was like he was reading every line of my story and still choosing to stand with me in that moment. That's when I dropped, not because he pushed me. Not because I was afraid of punishment, but because my soul remembered him deeper than my doubts, deeper than my stubbornness. There was a memory in my spirit, an imprint I didn't know was there that recognized the one who formed it. I collapsed not with shame, but with reverence. My knees hit the ground that wasn't a ground, my head bowed without effort. My whole being bent not because I was forced, but because I couldn't do anything else in the presence of such love. And that's what stunned me more than anything, his love. It didn't come like a soft whisper or warm hug, it came like a force, intense and overwhelming. A love so pure it exposed every false version of love I'd ever known. It wasn't emotional fluff, it was truth in its purest form. And it said without words, "You were always mine." I couldn't speak, I didn't need to. He already knew all the words I might have said. Apologies, questions, defenses, explanations melted in his presence. He wasn't looking for a speech, he was looking at me. And somehow in that look, he was already answering questions I hadn't asked yet. And then finally he spoke. The voice wasn't thunder, it wasn't loud, but it filled the air like a vibration in my soul. You fought fires for your city, but now I will show you what it means to fight for the kingdom. I didn't understand all of it in that moment, but something inside me cracked wide open. Those words landed like fire, not burning me, but igniting something that had been cold for a long time. I knew exactly what he meant, not because I had the theology to unpack it, but because he had just spoken to my spirit in its native language. I had fought with discipline, with grit, with a clear mission and loyalty to my brothers. But the war he was showing me now wasn't about geography or governments. It was deeper, wider, more eternal. This wasn't about flames or collapsed buildings. This was about souls. I saw flashes, brief images. He allowed me to glimpse people on their knees in prayer. A mother crying for her lost son, a man at the edge of suicide reaching for a dusty Bible. A missionary preaching in a remote village, a child singing to God in a war-torn city. These weren't firefighters in uniform, but make no mistake, they were in battle. And he was calling me to that war. Not to destroy, but to restore. Not to command, but to serve. Not to protect a building, but to carry the cross. His words settled into my spirit like a seed. And even now, I feel them still growing. You fought fires for your city, but now I will show you what it means to fight for the kingdom. And I knew this wasn't the end of my story. He hadn't brought me here to reward me for a life well lived. He brought me here because there was more. More to learn, more to see, and one day more to tell. I was about to enter the training of my soul. And what he would show me next would break everything I thought I knew about sin, prayer, and what it means to actually know God. When Jesus looked at me, it wasn't like anything I'd ever experienced. Not on earth, not even in a 5-alarm fire. He didn't glare, he didn't scold, he didn't sigh in disappointment. But I still couldn't meet his eyes for long. Not because he was harsh, but because the truth radiating from him was so complete that it made everything inside me tremble. Not from fear, but from the weight of being seen. It's one thing to feel guilty about something. It's another thing to be completely exposed in front of perfect holiness. I don't mean embarrassment, I mean a kind of spiritual nakedness where there are no excuses left, no bravado, no yeah, but logic. In that moment, I wasn't a firefighter. I wasn't a man who had saved lives. I wasn't strong, composed, or trained. I was just me. And all the pieces I had kept hidden from everyone else were suddenly right there, hovering between us like open wounds. And still, he didn't turn away. That was what wrecked me because I knew what was coming. He was about to show me my life, not the public version, not the highlight reel, the real thing. And he did, but not like a courtroom. There were no lawyers, no verdicts, no booming declarations, just moments, scenes. They unfolded before me like living memories, more vivid than anything I'd ever recalled. I wasn't just watching them, I was in them again. I saw myself as a teenager, full of anger and cynicism after my dad left. I felt the bitterness, the pride, the way I'd built walls to protect myself, walls that turned into fortresses over time. I saw myself at the academy, learning to push past pain, to detach, to bury emotion beneath procedure. It made me a good firefighter, it made me a leader, but it also made me hard in ways I didn't realize then. The scenes shifted quickly, like flipping through a Souls file folder. Arguments with girlfriends where I chose silence over vulnerability. Nights out with the crew where I numbed the ache I didn't even know I had with alcohol. Clicks on websites in the dead of night when I convinced myself it didn't matter. Moments where I could have spoken life into someone at the scene of an accident but chose professional detachment instead. Times I laughed at a cruel joke just to fit in. Times I ignored the voice in my heart that said, "This isn't who you are." And then came the worst part, the indifference. The moments where I simply didn't care, not about God, not about people, not about truth. I had built an identity that looked composed, disciplined, even honorable on the outside, but on the inside I had become cold, numb, proud of being self-sufficient. Proud that I didn't need saving. I had convinced myself I was a good man because I wasn't the worst. I ran into burning buildings, I saved lives, I didn't betray my brothers. But now, in front of truth himself, that whole defense crumbled like paper in a fire. I wasn't a bad man, but I wasn't a free one either. That realization crushed me because in every memory I could see not just what I did, but what it cost me, the distance it created between me and the one I now saw so clearly. Sin wasn't just breaking rules, it was walking away from love. That's when Jesus spoke. The tone in his voice wasn't anger, it was something deeper, like sorrow wrapped in love. Like a father mourning the time he lost with his child. Sin isn't just breaking rules, he said, it's walking away from me. Those words pierced deeper than any shrapnel I'd ever encountered because in one sentence, he stripped away every misconception I'd ever had about God, religion, and morality. I used to think sin was about getting caught, about consequences, about good people versus bad people. But now I saw it for what it really was, separation. Every selfish choice, every lie, every time I ignored someone who needed me, every time I told God, not now. Those weren't just missteps, they were steps away. Steps away from the one who had loved me before I ever knew his name. Steps away from the one who had created me, waited for me, and never stopped calling me home. I dropped to my knees again, not from pressure, but from the weight of that revelation. The presence of Jesus didn't crush me, it held me, but it didn't let me stay blind. I could feel the mercy in his nearness, but also the ache of what could have been if I had only listened sooner. I began to weep, not the kind of tears you hold back in front of your crew, not the silent kind you wipe away quickly. These were deep, soul-tearing sobs that came from somewhere I hadn't touched in years. I wept because I finally saw who I really was. Not just a firefighter, not just a man trying to do the right thing, but a son who had been lost. And still Jesus stayed, he didn't walk away. He didn't sigh or scold or say, "It's too late." He reached toward me not with arms of judgment, but with a presence that pulled me close, even as I was collapsing. In that moment, I understood something I'd never grasped in any church or sermon. God doesn't want perfection, he wants your heart back. I had spent my life trying to be strong enough to not need saving. But here I saw the truth, you don't get free by getting stronger, you get free by surrendering. I looked up, eyes blurred, heart exposed, and whispered something I never thought I'd say again. "I'm sorry." It wasn't polished, it wasn't religious, it was real, and I meant every word. And though he didn't say anything right away, I could feel it, forgiveness. It came not like a verdict, but like a healing, like a weight being lifted off my soul. The burden of years of pride, shame, and silence, all falling off in one silent moment of surrender. Jesus didn't need to list my sins, he had already paid for them. What he wanted was me, and now I wanted him too. And that's when everything began to shift again. Because now that I had seen the truth about sin, he was about to show me how to live free from it. Not just forgiven, but transformed, not just rescued, but reborn. And what came next would change how I saw prayer, fasting, and power forever. After I saw what sin really was, how it wasn't just about doing wrong, but about walking away from love, I thought I had reached the deepest point of this encounter. I thought the breaking of my pride, the tears, the realization that I wasn't free had been the core of what Jesus brought me here to show. But he was only getting started. What came next didn't just change how I saw my past, it changed how I understood the war I was still a part of. The scene around me began to shift. The light remained, but the atmosphere grew heavier. Not in a dark or oppressive way, but in a way that made my spirit stand at attention. It felt like stepping onto a battlefield, but not one made of dirt or concrete or blown-out buildings. This was spiritual terrain, I could feel it in my bones. Jesus stood beside me, not like a commander barking orders, but like a king with infinite calm and unstoppable authority. He gestured forward, and I saw something that shook me. There were soldiers, not firefighters, not any military force I recognized. These were people of every background, young, old, male, female, some in armor, some in rags, some carrying weapons that glowed like they were forged from light itself. And they were fighting not with fists or axes, but with prayer, with worship, with tears. I saw a woman on her knees weeping into her hands, and I thought she was breaking until I saw demons shrieking and fleeing around her. Her prayer wasn't weakness, it was a weapon. Then I saw a man fasting. He looked physically weak, almost trembling. And yet in the spirit, he burned like a furnace. His flesh was small, but his authority in the spirit was massive. Every time he cried out the name of Jesus, it echoed like thunder through the unseen realm. I turned to Jesus, stunned. "What is this?" I asked. "Why have I never seen this before?" And he looked at me, not angry, but honest. "Because men train their bodies for war," he said, "but few train their spirit." That sentence hit harder than any backdraft or explosion I'd ever experienced. I had spent years training my body to endure. I had pushed myself to the limit of physical performance. I knew pain, I knew fatigue, I knew how to lead men into danger without blinking. But here now, I saw how little I had done to prepare my soul. Jesus continued, "You were never supposed to fight alone." That line crushed me and lifted me at the same time. He showed me more. Images flashed like windows opening, believers crying out in midnight hours, entire households fasting and praying over nations, children speaking the name of Jesus with more force than armies. I saw demonic forces retreating, not from fire hoses or governments, but from the prayers of the righteous. I saw strongholds crumble at the whisper of the word of God spoken in faith. Then I saw the other side, people who didn't know the battle they were in. Christians distracted by comfort, believers who prayed only when desperate. Men and women with authority but no awareness. They were being wounded not because they lacked power, but because they never learned how to use it. I saw demons not afraid of titles, but terrified of intimacy with God. I saw churches full of programs but empty of prayer. Sermons polished but prayer closets full of dust. And then I saw myself before this encounter, before I died. I remembered how I used to view prayer as a last resort, a thing for soft people, emotional types. I thought fasting was outdated, extreme, maybe even dangerous. I saw it as a religious tradition, not a living discipline. But now, standing here in the presence of Jesus, watching what was truly happening in the spirit realm, I saw the truth. Prayer is how you load your weapon. Fasting is how you sharpen your blade. Surrender is how you stay alive. Jesus showed me how fasting starves the flesh so the spirit can breathe. How when we push away physical desires, we open space for spiritual clarity. He showed me how in the wilderness he fasted not because he was weak, but because he was preparing for war. How the enemy didn't fear his hunger, he feared his obedience. In prayer wasn't just a spiritual voicemail. It was communication in real time. It was alignment. It was strategy. When Jesus prayed, heaven moved, and he was trying to teach us to do the same. I remembered all the times I had walked into burning buildings with body armor, a helmet, and tactical intel, and how little attention I had given to preparing my spirit. I remembered moments of temptation I thought were minor, but now I saw they were spiritual ambushes. I remembered moments when I ignored that small voice telling me to pause, to pray, to ask. And I remembered ignoring it. Jesus didn't shame me, he reminded me. This is why I said, watch and pray that you do not fall into temptation. The war around you is not just seen, it's fought in the unseen. Then he showed me something that nearly broke me. He showed me men I had served with, firefighters and paramedics who had fought bravely in the flesh but were dying in the spirit. They carried trauma, addiction, shame, guilt. Some of them hid it well, some didn't. I saw how spiritual wounds are just as real as physical ones, and how few of us had ever been taught to fight for healing in that arena. And then he handed me something. I don't know how to describe it except to say it felt like a sword but not made of steel. It was light but it carried weight, it burned but it didn't consume. It wasn't something I held with my hands, it was something I carried with my life. Take this back with you, Jesus said, teach them to fight. I didn't answer right away, I just wept because I knew what he meant. Prayer wasn't a ritual, it was a battlefield. Fasting wasn't for the holy elite, it was fuel. And surrender wasn't weakness, it was power under divine command. In that moment, I made a decision. I didn't want to be just a warrior in the flesh, I wanted to be a soldier of the spirit. Not with pride, not with ego, but with intimacy, obedience, and fire. And just when I thought the revelation was complete, he turned to me and said, "Now, let me show you what love really looks like." And with that, the atmosphere changed again. Because the next thing he would show me was the heart of God himself. If there was one part of my experience I struggled the most to put into words, it's this. I've described combat, I've described pain, I've even described the terror of being utterly exposed before holiness. But what Jesus showed me next wasn't something you define, it was something you feel. And once you do, you are never ever the same. The battlefield faded again. The spiritual war he had shown me slowly dissolved into something deeper, softer, yet somehow even heavier. I didn't know how to explain it at the time, but I was about to encounter the very heart of God. Not as an idea, not as a doctrine, not as a theology, but as a living force, the core of everything that ever was and ever will be. Love, not the kind we throw around on holidays, not the kind we hear in songs or say automatically to people we barely know. No, this love wasn't soft, it wasn't fluffy, it was stronger than death. It held weight, glory, depth, fire. It was the most dangerous, disarming, life-giving thing I'd ever encountered. Jesus stood before me, radiant, calm, but focused. His eyes locked onto mine, and though he hadn't moved a step, I felt myself being pulled again. This time, not by light, not by gravity, but by the intensity of his affection. It didn't make sense. Why would someone so holy, so powerful, so infinite want me? But he did, and to prove it, he showed me what I saw next. It shattered every lie I believed about who God is and about how far he was willing to go to reach me. It began as a series of scenes again. But these were different than the ones where he had shown me my sin. These weren't about shame, these were about pursuit. I saw moments from my life, not dramatic ones, but quiet, seemingly insignificant moments. I saw myself walking alone as a kid after my parents fought. I felt the ache of loneliness, the tightness in my chest as I tried to act tougher than I was. And there in the background, though I hadn't seen it then, I now saw him, Jesus, watching, not judging, just being there. I saw myself in the fire academy, angry and defensive, lashing out at an instructor. I felt the fire in my words, the pride, the desire to be in control. And again, he was there, not scowling, not retreating, just present, grieved maybe, but never leaving. Then came the long nights at the firehouse, staring up at the ceiling, wondering if my life really mattered. I saw myself numbing my pain, staying busy, convincing myself I was fine, and still he was there. In every shadow, in every close call with death, in every missed opportunity to surrender, he was always there. And that's when he spoke again. You were loved when you were cursing me, you were seen when you were hiding, I never left. I collapsed not from fear, not from guilt, but from overwhelming love. Because in that moment, I realized something I had never truly believed. God hadn't been waiting on me to clean myself up, he had been chasing me all along. I wasn't loved because I got it right. I wasn't loved because I finally broke down and admitted I needed him. I was loved when I was at my worst. I was loved when I didn't love him back. The tears started again, but this time they weren't from sorrow. They came from a deep, holy healing that I didn't know I needed. For the first time in my life, I felt fully known and fully loved. Not for what I could offer, not for my strength, not for my performance, but because I was his. He knelt beside me, not towering, not distant, and gently placed his hand over my heart. I can still feel it, not physically, but in the deepest part of who I am. That touch didn't just comfort me, it restored something in me. I had been a fighter my whole life. I had learned how to endure, how to survive, how to detach. But I had never known how to be loved. And that's what he wanted me to understand most. He didn't die so I could follow rules. He didn't rise from the grave so I could attend services and memorize verses. He came, he bled, he conquered death so I could be restored to the Father. So that I could know I was loved. Not with the kind of love that fades or flinches, but with the kind of love that remakes a man from the inside out. You don't earn this, he said softly, you receive it. That sentence broke me again because I had spent so much of my life trying to be enough, strong enough, brave enough. And now, in one moment of divine honesty, he was telling me what I should have known all along. It was never about earning, it was always about receiving. He showed me one more thing, a glimpse, not a full vision, just a flash of what my life could look like if I truly lived from this love. I saw myself not as a firefighter in uniform, but as a man clothed in humility, baptizing others, hugging the broken, praying with tears streaming down my face, speaking to groups of people, not from a place of pride, but from the place of someone who had been rescued. I saw what it looked like to walk in real freedom. Not perfection, not religion, just a life fully surrendered to the love that never gave up on me. And in that moment, I knew I could never go back. Even if I returned to Earth, even if I woke up in a hospital, even if I lived another 50 years, I would never again live like I was unloved, unwanted, or unseen. Because now I had seen him and he had seen me. And soon he would send me back not just to live, but to tell others what I had seen. But not just yet, there was one more thing he had to show me. Now that you know my heart, he said, let me tell you why you must return. And with that, everything began to stir again. There was a moment somewhere between the visions and the stillness where I just stopped thinking about going back. It didn't even cross my mind anymore. Everything in me had settled into this place, this presence, this person. The war was over, the striving had stopped. The questions were answered, the wounds healed, the walls torn down. I wasn't just at peace, I was home. And I didn't want to leave, not ever. There's no way to explain the feeling of finally being complete. For so long, I had felt like something was missing. Even when life was good, even when I was performing well, earning commendations, leading with confidence, something deep in my soul had always felt like it was searching for a place to rest. To rest. I didn't know it at the time, but it was him. It was this presence, this perfection, this peace. And now that I had it, I wanted to hold on to it with everything in me. I turned to Jesus, and I don't know if I said it out loud or if he just heard it straight from my spirit, but the words came easily. Please let me stay, this is home. I wasn't afraid of returning. I wasn't even thinking about my body, my mission, my life down there. I was thinking about the glory I had just tasted. The kind of love and truth that ruins you for anything else. Once you experience it, the best this world has to offer suddenly feels like dust. I didn't want another breath if it meant being apart from this. But he looked at me, and I could already see the answer in his eyes. There was so much love in that gaze, but there was also fire, purpose, commission. Not just kindness, but a call. He didn't hesitate, he stepped forward and placed his hand over my heart again. The same place where I had felt so much healing just moments ago. But this time, it wasn't about restoration, it was release. You have a mission now, he said. I felt it the moment he said it, a divine responsibility, a holy burden, not heavy like guilt or obligation, but like honor, like being handed a weapon you were born to carry. And then he said something that branded itself into my soul. Tell them I'm coming back and I want their hearts, not their Sunday attendance. That sentence echoed like thunder in my spirit. I felt it ripple through everything I thought I knew about church, religion, and Christianity. It wasn't angry, it wasn't cynical, but it was clear, sharp, the kind of truth that cuts through fog. Jesus wasn't coming back for casual believers. He wasn't coming back for spectators. He wasn't coming back for people who know his name, but not his heart. He wanted devotion, not just doctrine, relationship, not just routine, surrender, not just singing. He wanted hearts. I wanted to argue just for a second, not out of rebellion, but out of desperation. But Lord, can't I do more here? Can't I serve you from this side? He smiled gently, and though he didn't answer directly, I understood. The work he needed me to do was there, on earth, in the dust and smoke and brokenness I had tried to escape. That was where the mission would matter most. That was where the fight would truly begin. And just like that, everything shifted. I didn't walk away, I didn't turn or say goodbye. I was pulled like my soul was being drawn through layers of light and sound and weight. It wasn't violent, but it was sudden. The beauty began to blur. The atmosphere I had soaked in started to stretch away from me like fog rolling back into the hills. And then came the pain of being born again into a broken world. Air flooded my lungs like fire, my chest convulsed, my back arched. My eyes snapped open and were nearly blinded by hospital lights. Beeping, shouting, hands holding me down. I gasped once, twice, a desperate roar, loud. It was like surfacing from the bottom of the ocean. I was back. A nurse shouted something I couldn't process. Another person yelled for vitals. I heard words like "he's awake" and code blue reversal, but I couldn't focus. My whole being was still caught somewhere between realms. My body ached, my heart raced, but my soul was on fire. As soon as I could form a thought, only one thing burned in my chest. I had to tell them. I didn't even know who them was yet. My unit, my family, the church, the world. But I knew I couldn't stay silent, not after that. Everything had changed, not just for me, but for everyone I'd ever meet. I had seen the heart of God, I had heard his voice, I had been given a message. Tell them I'm coming back and I want their hearts. And I knew even lying there in that hospital bed with wires in my arms and gauze on my chest, my life would never, ever be the same. I didn't come back the same, and I don't just mean physically. Yeah, my body was wrecked. I had a concussion, cracked ribs, nerve damage. It took weeks to walk on my own again. My legs felt like lead, my lungs burned with every deep breath. But the real change wasn't in the scars under my shirt. It was in the fire that had ignited behind my ribs. My heart was different, I was different, everyone could tell. The doctors assumed it was trauma. Near-death experiences can rewire how you think, one of them said, clipboard in hand. They didn't know what to make of the fact that I'd stare out the window for hours, whispering prayers I didn't even know I remembered. They noticed I was quieter, not withdrawn, just awake, like I could hear something they couldn't, like I was listening for a voice that spoke beyond these hospital walls. And I was listening for him. Jesus hadn't left me, that was the craziest part. I could still feel him, not in visions or blinding light, but in whispers, in a peace that didn't make sense. In the way scripture suddenly felt like breath instead of text. Someone brought me a Bible, not even a new one, just an old, marked-up paperback edition. I opened it and it was like the words were alive, like they'd been waiting for me. I read like a starving man, Genesis, Psalms, John, Romans. I didn't understand everything, but I didn't care. Every chapter felt like another piece of a puzzle falling into place. Every word Jesus spoke, and I read, made my chest ache. Not with sadness, but with a hunger for more. I had heard about Jesus my whole life, but now I was meeting him in every line. He wasn't just a figure, he was my friend, my savior, my commander, my king. And I wanted to be his, not halfway, not casually, not when it was convenient. I wanted to be fully surrendered. So when I was discharged, I didn't go back to old routines. I didn't hang out with the same guys, go to the same bars, or scroll through the same distractions. I didn't care about image anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to obey. I just wanted to be his. It was a Sunday when it happened. I walked into a church I'd never been to before. It wasn't big, no flashy lights, no rock band, no hype. Just wooden pews, a dusty pulpit, and a group of people who seemed to actually want to be there. I sat in the back, nervous and restless, clutching that beat-up Bible like a lifeline. When the service ended, people started to leave, but I didn't move. I stood up, walked straight to the front, and looked the pastor in the eye. What do I have to do to give my life to him? He didn't ask for a backstory, he didn't give me a pamphlet. He just smiled and said, "Let's pray." I can't even tell you what I said that day. I just remember sobbing right there in front of everyone. My knees hit the floor, my forehead pressed against the wood, and I emptied myself out. Every word was raw, honest, real. No filters, no pride left, just a man who had seen God and knew there was no life apart from him. And then came the question that had been burning inside me since I came back. Baptism. I wanted to be baptized, not as a tradition, not to join a club, not to check a box, but to die to everything I used to be and come up washed, branded, filled with the life he gave me. I didn't want religion, I wanted resurrection. They planned the baptism for the following weekend. Word spread fast, mostly through the firehouse. Some of my firefighter brothers heard, and a few of them showed up, mostly out of curiosity. One of them joked, didn't think we'd see Ryan in holy water unless he tripped and fell into it. I laughed too, but deep down I prayed that they'd see what I had seen, that the same fire would catch hold of them. When the day came, I stood in the water, jeans and a black t-shirt, hands trembling, not from fear, but from reverence. I had faced flashovers. I had walked into the unknown with an axe in hand and steel in my spine. But this was different. This was sacred. The pastor asked if I believed Jesus Christ was the Son of God, that he died for my sins and rose again. I didn't hesitate. I do, I said, and he saved me. The moment I went under, it wasn't the water that hit me. It was the weight of everything I was leaving behind. The pride, the sin, the silence, the stubbornness, the pain, the shame, the pretending. I left it all in the grave of that baptismal pool. And when I came up, I was weeping. I don't mean a few emotional tears. I mean full surrender, shoulders shaking, breath catching, hands raised, heart wide open. I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. I had spent my whole life trying to hold it together. Now I let it all go. I looked up through blurred eyes and saw my brothers standing in the back. A few of them were still, arms crossed, unreadable expressions. One of them, one I never expected, had tears running down his face too. He wouldn't admit it then, but later he told me, something hit me that day. I couldn't explain it. I didn't need him to, because I knew this wasn't just about me getting my life together. This was about resurrection power flowing through broken men like me. This was about God taking a firefighter, humbling him, healing him, and sending him back to be a warrior of the Spirit. This was transformation, and it wasn't over yet. Because even though I had been baptized, reborn, filled with fire, there was one more thing I had to do. Tell the world what I saw. The moment I opened my mouth to do it, the vision started again. It's been over a year since I came back, and not a single day has passed without me remembering what I saw. Some mornings I wake up in complete stillness, as if something is waiting just beyond the silence. Other days it all rushes back at once. The light, the voice, the weight of his presence, the truth that pierced through every layer of who I used to be. It's hard to explain what it's like to carry eternity inside your chest after coming face to face with it. I didn't come back with a story to impress people. I came back with a message that won't let me go. I don't live the same way anymore. I don't approach a single day with indifference. There's a fire in me now. Not emotional hype, not religious performance, but something deeper. I used to fight just to survive. Now I live to serve. I spend time with God every single day, not because someone told me I should, but because I can't imagine life without him. I pray not to perform, but to breathe. I fast because I need the noise of the world to quiet down so I can hear him more clearly. And I speak when I get the chance. I speak whether it's to strangers, friends, firefighters, or men I once called brothers. I tell them what I saw because I know what it cost me to live without it. People often ask me if what I experienced was real. I tell them it's more real than anything I've ever touched. I tell them I met Jesus not in theory, not in imagination, but face to face. I tell them he knew me completely and he still loved me. He didn't come to show off his power, he came to show me his heart. And he didn't just restore me, he sent me back with a call. He told me to tell you that he's coming back. He said it clearly, not in poetic language, not in mystery. He said it straight to my soul, he's returning. And he wants the hearts of his people, not just their church attendance, not just their religious habits, not just their surface level belief. He wants what we've been hiding. He wants what we've been afraid to surrender. He wants us to come home. Since I've returned, I've had more moments, visions, dreams, spiritual impressions that confirm what I saw was only the beginning. I've seen things in prayer that I still don't fully understand. Some of it I've spoken about, some of it I've written down. And then there's one thing, one vision that I haven't spoken of at all. Not because I'm afraid, but because I've been waiting for the right moment. It was the last thing he showed me before I left, a glimpse, a flash. But it burned into me so deeply that I still feel it now, like a fire I haven't been allowed to release. That moment is coming, I believe it. I don't know if it will be next week, next month, or tonight. But when I share it, I know it won't be for entertainment. It will be because someone somewhere needs to hear it. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone you know. Maybe it's someone who's never stepped foot in a church, but is lying in bed tonight wondering if God is even real. I believe what I saw was never meant to be kept to myself. It was meant to wake people up, to stir hearts that have gone cold, to call the wandering home. If you've made it this far, then maybe this message was meant for you. Maybe you've been drifting. Maybe you've been stuck in a version of faith that looks good on the outside but feels empty on the inside. Maybe you've been running from God, or maybe you've just never realized how close He really is. I want you to know something: He sees you. He's not waiting for you to get everything right. He's waiting for your yes, He's waiting for your heart. If this story has stirred something in you, if it's reminded you of something you used to believe or pointed you towards something you've never experienced before, then don't just let it fade. Talk to Him, reach out, ask questions. Pick up the Bible again, kneel down and speak. Even if you don't know what to say, He's listening. And if you've had an experience of your own, a moment, a dream, something you've never told anyone, I want to hear it. I believe there's power in testimony, and someone else might need to hear what you've seen too. So leave it in the comments, start the conversation, let someone else know they're not the only one. If this story meant something to you, if it opened your eyes or pulled on your heart, then I ask you to do one thing. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's searching, someone who's drowning in silence, someone who doesn't know how much they're loved. Like the video, subscribe if you want to walk with me as I keep sharing more.